Hey guys, it's me. I'm back for the second time. Yes, I got 6 interviews. I'm going to be in your eyes all day long. Guys, this is going to be an amazing episode with my friend Sherrie. We're going to be talking about some uncomfortable stuff here. So, guys, if you are a crybaby like me, get your tissues ready because we're going to be talking about some stuff, but it's real life stuff. But first, I want to thank Jessica. Thank you so much for putting us together. You're a woman of faith, and I'm so grateful that you put us together. And also, I just want to thank, before I even get started, thank you for Monster Energy for giving me the energy to go 8 hours talking on this little computer. So thank you, Monster Energy. I want to say thank you. So Sherrie, welcome to the show. We finally got together. How are you?
I am great. And I too want to say thank you to Jessica, who is an amazing person. And I love her so much. And she's a God connection. And I love God connections. So Jessica, I love you.
So before we even get started, because I do have a traumatic brain injury, if I don't say it, I'm going to forget it. And if I don't write stuff down, I'm going to forget it. What is your definition of resiliency?
Ooh. Well, obviously, that can mean a lot of things for a lot of people. For me, it was to be able to find purpose in living for all of my childhood that I can remember as a victim of sexual abuse and assault and trauma and physical abuse and mental and emotional and all of that, carrying that into my adult years. And then finally coming to an end with a suicide attempt. And through all of that, being able to pick that up, believing and thinking that I'm a nobody and that I'm worthless and that I'm all the things that I've been told I was, and finding the right kind of help. I was in talk therapy for a long time, then started in EMDR therapy, to be able to take all of those broken pieces and put them together and know that I'm not what people say I'm not the person that the labels that people gave me, but instead I'm able to pick that all up. And now I can go out into the world and I can educate people from a victim's point of view on what I've been through. And I couldn't do that without God's grace and carrying me all that time when I was unable to carry myself. So I was resilient enough to survive what I survived, resilient enough to do the work to get healthy, which was hard work. Therapy's hard work. And then to be able to go out and tell my story over and over and over again. And every time you tell it, as you know, you're dumping adrenaline and you're reliving this traumatic past. And now I'm in this wonderful place that I get to educate people, and there's God will always, he always wins, and he gets the glory. He'll take your mess and make it your message, and that's what he's done for me.
And it's one of my favorite quotes, that God never wastes a hurt. Never. That he'll turn your tears into ashes, and also that turn your mess into your message. So, but now if somebody would just log on and they see the Sherrie that we see now with the beautiful face and enjoying life, living by the beach in Texas. It's hasn't been all unicorns and rainbows, and you've dealt with incest, you've dealt with sexual trauma, you've dealt with trauma, you've suicide attempt like I dealt with. So take us back. Let's hop in the DeLorean. Let's get in the Wayback Machine.
Ooh,
take us back.
All the way back.
So take us all the way back to when this everything first started.
My First memory, and I have to tell you, I have complex PTSD. So if I veer us off into the ditch, I'll drive us back. We just might get a little bumpy. Um, and I, my life is not Skittles and rainbows, and I can't sugarcoat it to make it be that. That's a disservice to me and my story and to what God's brought me through. So I just have to tell it like it is. And it's not meant to be offensive, but it's my life. It's what I lived. It's what I know. So my perpetrator was my father. My parents were married. I have two siblings. I have a younger sister and a younger brother. My first memory of my abuse, I was 7 or 8. Perpetrators are very, very good at what they do. And that's one thing that I share with law enforcement is that there's such a difficulty for people to understand sexual assault. You know, why did you stay? Why you coulda, shoulda, woulda, all of those things. But I try to take people back to, I didn't make the decisions that I made to stay alive with this brain that I have today. I had a child's brain, and I think we need to, survivors of sexual assault need to give ourselves grace in that we couldn't make decisions then with the brain that we have now. So first of all, give yourself some grace. Perpetrators are very good at telling you who you are, what will happen if you tell someone. They know how to keep their victim very tiny and very small. Now, I grew up in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. We weren't talking, nobody came to my school and said, if someone's touching you inappropriately, you should tell someone. We still struggle talking about sexual assault and abuse. We dang sure weren't talking about it back then. So all I knew to do was to try to be tiny and small. And I always thought if I could be perfect enough or tiny enough or quiet enough or whatever the enough was, that I could somehow become invisible and maybe my father would forget I was there. And that didn't happen. Our home was very, very chaotic, and you never knew when my father was going to become unhinged. So there was all of these dynamics. My sexual abuse was often, very, very often. Now, once is horrific. Over once, then it's just compounded over and over and over. My value and my worth, I was told by my father who I was. All of these labels that were put on me, I'm dumb and stupid and worthless and fat and ugly and I would never amount to anything. And it's taken me years and years to stop wearing those labels that people put on me and to walk in the light and the grace of who God says I am. And so there's a huge space in between there because I lived in such darkness and such a horrific place that a child can't learn in school and they can't thrive and they can't learn social skills and they can't be a communicator and all of the things that we learn that a child learns. And so I just pulled back into myself and tried to become tiny and small, didn't tell anyone. My job that I put on myself was to protect my sister. I believed for many years that I had done that. And when I got into high school, I began to run away. I lived in a small town. It didn't take long for the police to find me. They were always very kind. They would take me home. They all knew my dad. Everybody in my community thought my dad was a great guy. But they never asked me why I was running. And so I work with homeless women every Thursday night on the streets of Corpus Christi. And what I know about myself and working with homeless women for 11 years every Thursday is that we're not running to something. Whatever's behind us is worse than whatever we believe to be in front of us. And so if we can find out what somebody's running from, then we can help more. And then when I was a senior in high school, I had reached a place that I was at a point that I couldn't take it anymore. And so I ended up getting married when I was a senior in high school because I thought that would change my life, and that I could be normal, whatever that was, with no therapy and no healing, and my children's father didn't know about my past, and so I'm a 17-year-old kid, and I get married in December of my senior year, and in August after I graduated I had a baby, and my trauma just kept compounding on itself, and I did the best I could to be normal, whatever I thought that was. I could, if you say, "How are you?" I can smile and say, "I'm fine, thank you. How are you?" And but I couldn't find me because it was buried under so many layers and years of trauma that hadn't ever been addressed. And I truly believed at that point in my life that I was the only person in the world who was a survivor of incest. I didn't believe that it happened to anybody else. Now, obviously, we know now as a general population that that's absolutely not the truth. And there are many, many of us. It's just that we're filled with guilt, shame, and humiliation. And so statistically, only 7% of us go on to tell our story because it's just too much. We are overwhelmed by what happened to us. So did I answer your question?
Yeah.
I forgot what the question was. I told
you got me crying already. You got me crying already. I wanted to hit on a couple of things. As you see, I'm writing stuff down. One of my best friends, and I'm going to have her back on the show, Annette Wittenberger. She has a podcast called The Truths That We Hide Behind. I'm going to hook you guys up so you guys can actually talk.
Oh, the truths we hide behind. I love it. Yes.
And she's a survivor of sexual abuse also. But something when I had her on the show is, because this is also a teaching podcast, because you said this happened around age 7. Okay.
That's my first
I want you to take me back to the young girl you were at age 6, and then take me to the girl after the incidents, because sometimes, when not all times, but if some parents can watch out for this if they're listening, if your children gets hurt or abused, a lot of times if they were quiet before, now they might become outgoing, gregarious, out of control. Or if they were outgoing and gregarious and out of control, and then they get abused, they might go into their shell.
Very true.
You're never the same person. Just like I just had a friend of mine, I just released his podcast yesterday, and he had an officer involved shooting with taking a life. So he's not the same officer that put on that gun belt that day than the next day. So take us back to when you were 6, and then take us back to when you were 7, the changes afterwards.
Well, here's part of the problem with trauma is that the brain is very, very protective, and it's the brain's job to protect you. And the brain will only give you whatever it thinks you can handle. So memories don't come back linear as law enforcement would love them to do. And as us victims, and I'm not a victim anymore, would love them to be linear, but they're not. So my first memory is full penetration. Now, that's not typical for a perpetrator. Normally there's a grooming process, but I don't have anything before that. I don't have any memories at all before that. Now, my therapist, my longtime therapist, believes that there was abuse before that. It's just that I don't have that. And I still remember things weekly or monthly that I had forgotten. I still have flashbacks. I'm still working through all of those things. And what I know is that every time another piece breaks off, that means my brain is healthy enough that I can take that and I can work my way through that memory or that event, and then I can put it in the back of my brain and I can go on. So whether that might eventually come back, though those years priors, I don't know. But what I've decided and what God has shown me is that I don't have to have all of the pieces. I don't have to have the years prior. I just have to start where I remember. So all the before, I don't know. The after, I just know that I wanted to be invisible. I wanted to be forgotten. I thought if I could be tiny enough and small enough and quiet enough and perfect enough, that just perhaps people would forget I was there. And that was my goal, was to be forgotten, which I'm not sure I've ever verbalized that before in that way, but that's what I want. I didn't want to be seen. I didn't, I wanted my body covered up. I became a compulsive hand washer. I still am. I struggle with that. I'm so much better than I used to be. But I just remember being very, very withdrawn, very difficult to make friends. I moved a lot as I was growing up. We moved from Kansas to Alaska a lot, back and forth and back and forth. So I was never left any place really long enough to develop roots or become friends with a neighbor, the neighbor mom, and develop a trust relationship there. And I struggled for a very long time trusting people. I struggled with abandonment issues. I'm still working on that. I have been married for 22 years. And I used to ask my husband's name is Gary, almost every day, tell him, I know you're going to leave. I know you are. And he'll say, you are the most self-fulfilling prophecy person I've ever met. You know, he's still here 22 years later through all of my layers of crazy. But if you don't, I think what I want people to know is if you don't have all the pieces, that doesn't make your story any less true. And you don't have to have all the pieces. Just take the pieces that you have and start working through them. And I think that's probably not anywhere near what you asked me.
No, but it's just perfect but it brings me back because somebody asked me yesterday, tell me your favorite childhood story. And I had to be honest, and I'm like, from ages 11 and below, I don't have any memories. They're all locked away in some blue door. It's going to open someday, but it's not ready to open yet. And it's okay. It is. So that's why a lot of people, when you're dealing with trauma, and then you ask, well, what do you remember? And a lot of them I don't remember. And sometimes when you can't just open and close that door, usually sometimes when that door closes, it's closed for a long time until you get healthy enough to find the key and open it again.
And when mine did open,
that's why I wanted that, because that touched me when I started thinking. I'm like, man, I don't remember Christmases.
Yeah, I don't either.
No, and I got 3 children now, and I got 11 and 19 and a 21-year-old, and hopefully they can remember every holiday, every Christmas. They have good memories, because I don't.
And that's my goal too, is to make sure that they have those core memories that they can always pull back up and remember really great things that we did, and whether they cost a lot of money or whether they didn't, just having implanting those core memories.
So, okay, before we even get started, I want to dig a little bit deeper, and I'm so grateful, so humbled that we actually get to talk. So I just wanted to say thank you, guys. My dad came off the boat from Italy. He didn't speak a word of English, but he made his way in America as a documented alien, by the way. But he always said, you need a good mechanic, a good doctor, a good lawyer, and a good accountant to be successful in life. And my cousin Andrea, as you'll see down below or up above now, they have a full service gas station here in New Jersey. They're not cheap, but they do the job right the first time. So, guys, if they've been in business over 34 years, so if you want to get your trucks fixed and get them done right, check out Andrea and Ernie at E&A's Friendly Service. Cause I love you, I appreciate you. So let's talk about this, because I believe that everybody. I'm not wearing my shirt today, but I usually wear a shirt that says "Today I decide." We can either decide to go one way or we can go the other way. So if you would have turned out a criminal, or a drug addict, criminal, prostitute, then everybody would have said, well, from her background, I get it. But you went the opposite. So talk to us, because I'm sure at some time you're at a crossroad and you had to make that choice. So why did you make that right turn instead of a left turn?
I lived my life very fearful of consequences. My father was very physically abusive. So my job was to fly under the radar as much as I could, to stay perfect as much as I could, which is unrealistic. And I put all through my life, huge unrealistic goals to be perfect. And I don't expect that from anyone else, but that's what I've expected from myself. Gosh dang it, I forgot the question. Tell me again.
Why did you turn into going into being a first responder?
Oh gosh, I loved being a first responder. I was an EMT, absolutely loved it. Had the same partner for years and years in a small town in Kansas. It was a way I thought I could make a difference. I could be, probably because I'm very good. I've never thought of this until just now. Because I'm very good at detachment, because I've had to live my life detached. I could do that job very well, because I could detach from the emotional side of that, and the education side would kick in. The emotional side would fall back to the back, and so I could do everything technically for my patient without an emotional involvement. Now, that doesn't mean I wasn't caring and compassionate, but I was so very good at detaching. So I remember working a really bad wreck one time, and I needed to get my patient's C-collar on them, but I needed to get a heavy coat off of them, and I needed to do some things. And someone pulled up on the highway and stopped and helped. And I worked beside this person for, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes. And I lived in a small town. And a couple of days later, I saw this gentleman in the grocery store. And he said, "Sherrie, how's your patient?" And I said, "What patient?" And he said, "The one I helped you with the other night." And I said, "You helped me with my patient?" And he was the man that I worked shoulder to shoulder beside as I got this C-collar on and stuff. But all of that, I was able to step away from and just to go into what my job was. And I loved my job, and I felt like it was something that I excelled at. And the middle of the night runs were, but I had a great partner. She always drove. I always worked the back. And we lived in a little bitty town. The closest hospital was 30 miles away. So coming back, we had time to decompress a little bit and talk about what we'd done. But as an EMT, and it may be the same with some law enforcement, and law enforcement are my heroes. That's who I work with. There's no closure there. You don't know most of the time if your patient survived or didn't survive. Did your skills work? Did they not work? All you know to do is, in that amount of time that you have, to be the very best that you can be. And in my strive for perfection, those are the moments that I could take all of this need for perfection that I had placed upon myself, and be the very best that I could be.
All right, so let's talk about because veterans, and as we talked before we got on camera, veterans and first responders, we walk the same road, and we deal with the same things. And for me, I'm able to compartmentalize.
I just
Like
was
I
going
have
to
a
use
family
that word.
member. I have a
Yes.
family member that's dealing with her mother is about to pass away because of Alzheimer's and dementia. And she asked me, "Do you want to be there to help?" And I'm like, "Of course." She says, "Are you going to be okay?" And I'm like, I have something in me that when the shit hits the fan, I get quiet and I figure out the situation. I don't have emotions involved. I'm like, all right, this is what we got. Got to do this, do this, do this, and then I'll worry about the emotions later. And I think a lot of veterans and first responders have the same thing where we can, everything slows down when shit hits the fan for us, where everybody else is going chaos, where we live in chaos.
Absolutely.
A lot of us thrive in chaos. So that's one thing I'm good at. But something you mentioned, and I wanted to hit on this because I just had my friend, her name is Deborah Green. She was a dispatcher for many years. And we talked about how a lot of times if you're a police officer or a firefighter, you go to the blaze or you go to the arresting and the perpetrator's in jail or the house is burnt down. But with EMTs and dispatchers, they don't have closure, a lot of them, because you're on to the next call. Mm-hmm. And you really don't know what happened to that person. And dispatchers especially, sometimes they might call a police officer into a situation, and that police officer gets shot or gets killed. And now that's on their brain also. So I just want to give a big shout out to my EMTs and to my dispatchers. So take us behind the scenes of not having that, knowing what happened to the patients once they left your truck.
I think that I knew every single time that I gave 110%, that I gave compassion and I gave kindness and that I gave the absolute best care that I could give. And when I handed my patient off at the hospital, I knew I had done every single thing in my power to comfort them during that time. If it was a child, to help them not be so fearful. And at the same time, juggling all these pieces of equipment in the back that you're trying to juggle while you're bumping down the road, at 80 miles an hour. I had great satisfaction in knowing that I did the best that I could do. In the time that I had with them, I absolutely did the best I could do. To my knowledge, and obviously I don't know 1,000%, to my knowledge, I never lost a patient.
Okay, so
I certainly never lost a patient when I was in the back of the ambulance with them. I certainly never lost one then.
All right, so let's get back to the trauma, because I believe that, like, my mentor, Mr. Ed Milet, he told me that, because I deal with a lot of complex PTSD, and but my mindset shifted when he told me that nothing has ever happened to me. Everything has happened for me. And everything is a teachable moment.
Oh, that's
now,
rough.
But when somebody says, I'm an addict, or I'm an alcoholic, or I come from an abused household, I can say, come here, let's get a cup of coffee. Been there, done that, threw the t-shirt away. So God got me through it so I can help other people. So, and that's why I think if somebody asked me today, would you change anything in your life? And I said, absolutely not. I would not be the man I am today if it wasn't for everything that I went through. So I just wanted to put that out there, guys. God has a plan. We don't know what it
Absolutely.
is, but He has a plan. So I just wanted to say that, and I wanted to ask some questions because I'm a father of an 11-year-old. I got a 19-year-old and a 21-year-old, and because of the abuse, I'm very hyper vigilant, and I'm always looking, and I'm like, who's this guy talking to my daughter? Why is he talking to my daughter? And they're like, he's a teacher. He's supposed to talk to your daughter. So did you get really hyper vigilant when you had
Mhm.
your children?
Oh, yes, very, very. I still am probably. And my children are grown. They're 42 and 38 and 36 or somewhere close in there. And I probably still am very hyper vigilant with them. And I often think about their childhood because they grew up with a mom with a raging mental illness. And I recognize that now as I look back. At the time that I was so swallowed up in my mental illness, I had no idea how sick I really was and that I was just working on autopilot. Um, I could be whoever you need me to be. Um, I just couldn't be Sherrie because I had never found her. But I could be the PTA mom and I could be the little league coach mom that brings the treats, and I could be the Sunday school teacher, and I can be whoever you need me to be. It just took me until I was in my late 40s and early 50s to figure out who Sherrie was. Um, a great example of that is I hadn't been married very long to Gary, and one morning he said to me, "Sherrie, how do you like your eggs? I'm going to make you breakfast. How do you like your eggs?" And in a very typical trauma response, I said, "How do you like yours?" Because I wasn't given a choice. I just ate what was put in front of me as a child, and that was that. And he grew up in a very idyllic childhood with Ward and June Cleaver for parents, and he didn't even begin to understand dysfunction until he met me. And he said, "No, I just want to know how you like your eggs so that I can make you breakfast." And I said, "How do you like yours?" And he said, "I like mine scrambled." And I said, "That's how I like mine. I like mine scrambled." And I remember him looking at me and almost pleading with me. And he said, "Sherrie, I just want to know how you like your eggs." And I dropped to my knees and I started crying. And I said, "I don't know. No one's ever asked me that. I don't know how." I do know now that I'm not a big egg eater and I'd prefer to not have them. But that's what trauma, depths and layers of trauma does, is that we lose ourself. And I'll just be who you want me to be. If you're going to make me eggs, I don't want to be a bother to you. So just whatever you're making, that's what I'll have. Instead of saying, "You know what, I'd really like to have mine in an omelet," or whatever. But we get so lost in that trauma. So it took me a very long time to find myself and to begin to learn what my favorite color was, and the sound of my own laughter instead of this fake laughter that I had perfected and this fake smile that I had perfected. And I kept digging and digging and till I found her and discovered that, she's not quiet at all. And she has a mouth, a loud mouth. And oftentimes Gary will be out somewhere and he'll say, "I can't always see you, but I can always hear you." I have a loud mouth. I don't know a stranger now. So unraveling this big ball of mess that we're left with, um, keep working it. The work is hard, but underneath there, you'll find yourself and you're going to really like the person that you find.
All right, so let's talk about Gary because my wife has known me since I'm 14 years old. We were actually not even high school. We were grade school sweethearts. So she's known me uh, from the wild child that I was to now, being sober 35 years and doing what I do. But a lot of people that I've talked to, especially if they've gone through sexual trauma, military sexual trauma, it really affects not only the boardroom, but it also affects the bedroom.
It does.
Because then you're like, I got nothing. All I know is bad. I don't know anything good. So what was that like, when you and Gary, started dating and got married? It had to be because, having that trust in the bedroom is major. And when you've already been violated, that trust, for me, like, I never became friends with anybody growing up because I'm like, I'm going to be moving again. I went to 14 different schools by the age I was 13. So I'm like, I'm not going to make friends because I'm just going to leave again.
Because it hurts too much.
And I don't trust you because you're probably going to hurt me.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just going to put up that wall and not be that person that you're not going to want to be around me anyway. So talk to us about, what it's like to have a relationship and trying to be intimate, especially after what you went through.
I get that question a lot from young, I go into college campuses often. But even adults will ask me that question. How do I learn to let my partner touch me and it not be immediately going back to a bad touch? And I think there are many ways that people could work that. For us, for me, because I'm married to such an incredible man, and because my brain is broken and my PTSD will ebb and flow, it doesn't do that nearly as much now as it used to. It's very stable now, and I'm so very thankful. But he has learned to let me be the aggressor. That sounds like a really rough word. That's probably not the right word.
Hey, whatever it takes.
I'm not aggressive. When my mind is in a place where I can do that and be healthy and not be in a place where I go somewhere else, he's very good at that. And it's better and better and more often, and rarely anymore does it make a sharp left turn and I go someplace else. But he's also learned things like, he would never ever grope me or reach around and fondle me or anything like that, because those are triggers for me, and he knows that. So I think if you have a partner that's willing to learn a few things about you, what some of your triggers are. I shared with you that I have a fear of abandonment, and Gary's very good at trying his best not to get up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom or get a drink, because if I wake up and he's gone, then I'm in a panic because I believe he's left. Even though I've been married for 22 incredible years, and in my heart knows he's not leaving, but my head can't understand why he stays with a crazy person. So for us, that works. He waits on me and lets me decide when I'm at a place where I can do that.
All right. So now it took forever. It took for me to actually meet Mr. Gary Vaynerchuk to actually write my book and tell my story that nobody knew, because I hid it all inside, because I wasn't going to tell anybody of everything that happened to me, because it was a shame thing. And for me, it was like, it's none of their business anyway. But I wanted to put my story out there so I can start healing. For writing my book, it was very cathartic having to write it. it opened all the old wounds again, and I had to go
Absolutely.
through recovery. But you said nobody knew. So take us to that conversation at the kitchen table when you finally talked to Gary and said, this is who I am. This is what
Well,
I'm dealing with. Because sometimes a lot of us, we won't even open up to the most trusted person because we don't want to be like thinking, oh, they're broken and I don't want them to leave me. So I'm never going to tell them my deepest, darkest secrets.
there's two parts to that. I was 35 the first time that I told anybody about my abuse. And I was married to my children's father and living gosh, I don't even know how to describe it, a life that where I didn't try to make any bumps in the road and tried to be perfect. And I went to lunch with a friend, and randomly out of nowhere, my friend, her name is Dawn, I love you, said to me, Sherrie, I know about your dad. And I was absolutely floored. And I don't know how she knew. To this day, I don't know. I need to circle back all these years later and find out. So we talked about it. And then we made a promise to never talk about it again. And I thought, or my plan when I left lunch that day was to put all of these pieces now back into the box and put the lid back on the box and put it back into the back of my brain where it had been all those years, except the lid wouldn't close anymore. And I started spinning out of control very quickly. And I knew I was going to have to get some help immediately if I was going to survive this. And my children's father didn't know. And certainly my children didn't know. So I told my children's father, and then I decided that I wanted to talk to my sister. She's 2 years younger than me. And together we told my mom. And my mom confronted my father. And my father said, it's true. Everything they're telling you is true. And my mom made the decision to stay with my dad. So after that, as much as I tried in therapy and as much as I worked in therapy, I was not healthy. And my marriage dissolved not very long after that. So then when I met Gary unexpectedly, we met online, which I had a friend say, Sherrie, you have got to start dating somebody. And I said, no, I will never, nobody's ever going to leave me again. I'm never going to be in that position. And so at the time, which would have been in 2002, the only people that were online were mass murderers and pedophiles, I'm sure of it. And then there was me. And so I was going through, it was match.com. I was going through just looking at pictures, being very superficial. And I saw a picture of this guy and I thought, oh, that's a very handsome man. So I sent him a note. And then, so we corresponded like that for a while. And then we started talking on the phone, and we spent hours talking on the phone, and he kept asking me to dinner. And he lived 100 miles from me. And I kept saying, no, thank you. And no, thank you. And so the next time he asked me to dinner, I said, okay, I will go to dinner with you, but I need to tell you something. And he said, okay. And I remember on the phone just vomiting 40 years worth of information. And in my brain, I thought, that will teach you. And you'll stop asking me for dinner, to go to dinner. And I know you're going to leave. So just leave now before I get any more involved with you. And he was quiet on the phone for a little bit. And he said, well, I'd still like to take you to dinner. And I thought, there's something seriously wrong with you. Seriously, why do you want to go to dinner? I'm crazy. I just told you I'm crazy. So he knew before I ever went on a date with him. Didn't understand it because he had an idyllic childhood. His parents are amazing. But I was important enough to him that he wanted to learn all he could about mental illness and complex PTSD and trauma and all the things. And that was in February. And in October, I married that really nice guy 22 years ago. And was doing pretty good until Kansas City was home. And I'd been married 10 years, and he took a job in Corpus Christi, Texas. It was only for 1 year. I agreed to come for 1 year. I live in a little condo on the beach. I could spit in the ocean from where I'm at right now. And the change from leaving Kansas City and leaving what was familiar to me and what I knew and my home and my job and my friends and my family and moving to Corpus was more than my brain could handle. And Gary's very in tune to my mental health, but I'm an Academy Award-winning actress, and I hid that from him. He had taken a new job that he was loving and thriving in. And so I was 50 years old and decided that I had fought every single day of my life to stay alive. And I just was tired of fighting, and that there were things worse than dying, and living at that time for me was worse than dying. And so I set out with a plan, and I bought a cemetery plot, and I bought the clothes I wanted to be buried in, and I wrote out the program for the funeral, and I wrote out the obituary. And Gary leaves at 7:45 every morning and comes home for lunch at 8:15. I knew my time frame. I knew I wanted to be on the tile and not the carpet because I didn't want to leave a mess for Gary. A lot of things happened that morning. When they tell you, when you read that God will meet you where you are, I am telling you, he will meet you where you are. If it's in your kitchen floor ready to take your life, he will meet you where you are. And my life changed that day. That plan did not come to fruition. I speak sometimes at suicide conferences. I don't like to do that because when I speak at suicide conferences, I'm the only person on the list of speakers that's ever tried to take their life. Everybody else has read about it in a book and they have a college degree.
But real quick, because I am a suicide survivor. But and I know I can take myself, and people know that follow me, they know my story, but there's something because my book, the last chapter is, what does suicide look like? It's not what you think it looks like. A lot of people think that, hey, if somebody's going to take their lives, they're going to be depressed and disheveled. And I'm like, no, matter of fact, sometimes when somebody knows that the end is near, they start getting happier again. They start taking care of themselves. They start being a little bit more outgoing and happy because they know the end is near. So guys, if you guys are watching this, listen to what this young lady is going to say, and she's going to tell you what, suicidal ideations actually look like. So take us back to that exact moment when God touched you. What were you doing at the moment that he said, child, stand up?
I can tell you exactly what I was doing. I was in my kitchen floor, and I have a very dear friend. Her name's Holly. And Holly right now is traveling with me when I teach law enforcement. She's my partner. But she's been a longtime friend since I moved to Corpus. And before my suicide attempt, Holly and I were having a conversation, and my PTSD was really bad. And we had an agreement that if I was not in a place where I could ask for prayer to get me through this dark place, that I simply would text her the word pray. And that was all I had to text. And she knew that I was in a bad place. So I had gone through several of those, and then I would come back up out of the darkness and come back into the light. And we were having a conversation, and she said, Sherrie, do you pray for yourself? And she said, you're so quick to pray for everyone else, and you're such a prayer warrior, but do you pray for yourself? And I said, no, I don't. And she said, why? And I said, because there's no hope for me. I'm too far gone. My mental illness has taken over, and there's no way back from this. And she was really surprised that I didn't pray for myself. And that was kind of the end of that conversation. So that morning when I'm in my kitchen floor and I had my forehead on the tile. I was on my knees. I had my forehead on the tile, and I had all my, I have a chronic back injury. And so I had saved up narcotics. I didn't want Gary to have to clean a mess. It was very, very thought out. So I can still feel how cold the tile was that morning as I had my head on the tile. And I had my glass of water, and I was just done. And I was just done is all I can say. And I remembered Holly saying, Sherrie, have you ever prayed for yourself? And so in that moment, I said, Lord, I don't know how to pray for myself. I can pray for other people all day long, but I am so broken and such a mess. And I know I can't be fixed. I've been in therapy for years, and I'm unfixable. But if you're there, I got nothing. And so I laid there, and I don't know how much time passed with my head on the floor. And then I realized that I was hearing a sound I hadn't ever heard before. And I kind of sat up just a little bit and kind of cocked my head, and I thought, what's that noise? Now, for those of us that have mental illness and complex PTSD, the best way I can explain it in my brain is if you lined up 25 radios and you put them all on a different channel. Some are on hip hop, some are in Spanish, some are in country, and you play them full blast all the time. That's the noise that's in my head all the time. So I thought, what's that noise that I hear? And I sat up, and I'm still thinking, what is that? What is that noise? And I realized that noise was silence. And never in my life had I heard silence. And all the noise from my mental illness and all the static and all the confusion and all the radios, God had turned them all off. And for the first time, I could hear. I could really hear instead of trying to make my way through all of this chaos in my brain. And so I sat there for a long time, just in absolute awe that I was important enough to God, that he was there, and he heard me, and he turned off all the noise. But I had never prayed for myself because I thought I was hopeless. Now that I'm doing the work that God's called me to do, and I go out and I educate law enforcement, and I see the difference that I'm making, I can understand now why Satan tried so very hard to take me out, because I'm a voice for God, and I'm a voice in the darkness, and there's not a lot of people doing what I do. And he needed to take me out. But I survived that, and I praise God all the time. I decided that day that I would take my power back once and for all. Started in a new kind of therapy, started in EMDR therapy, which changed my life. But I had to tell Gary. I had to tell him what I had planned, and I knew he would be devastated that he had missed the mark, that he hadn't seen, and he would blame himself. So that was the most difficult. And then I had to tell my children, and my children and I are very close. And that was hard because I had kept so much from them. And I made a vow to Gary and myself and my children that I would never, and I wear my semicolon very proudly. And it's a constant reminder that I'll never, ever go back there. And for people that see it and know what it is, we're a kindred spirit. And for people that see it and say, what in the world is that? I say, I'm really glad you don't know. Let me tell you what this is. So God, I have people say to me, if there really was a God, why does he allow bad things to happen to people? Why didn't he protect you? Why didn't he kill your father? Why? But God gives us free choice. He gives me free choice. He gives you free choice. He gave my father free choice. Now, that doesn't mean that God left me, because I believe that he never did. I believe that every time my father was doing horrific things to me, God was weeping openly beside me, at what was happening, but he gives us free choice. And so I believe that he never left me, but for years I thought that he completely abandoned me. And I know now that he didn't, and that he was there, and that now I have this torch to go out into this dark world and help people understand trauma and understand sexual abuse and why we present to law enforcement so differently than victims of other crimes. And I know it's making a difference. And I know that when law enforcement, who are my heroes, shout out to law enforcement, you're the bomb. I know that when they work a sexual assault case, if they've sat under me, I have a 4-hour and an 8-hour class. I go on site and teach them. I know they're going to remember me because they tell me, Sherrie, I will never forget you. And when I work a sexual assault case, I'll do my job better because you've helped me understand things I didn't know. So, sidebar, according to the FBI, the average law enforcement officer, from the time he enters the academy until he hangs up his belt, like my chief just did that I worked with for 6 years, they have an average of 2 hours training in sexual assault across the whole span of their career. So we give them, then that's no fault of theirs. So we give them 2 hours of training, and then we give them our most vulnerable victim and say, here you go, fix this. And when I ask my law enforcement officers, who in the room wants to take the sexual assault cases? I mean, they're all looking down and up and around, and they don't want to make eye contact. Nobody wants them because we haven't equipped them. And that's my mission. That's my job. That's my goal in life, is to get in front of as many law enforcement officers as I can and equip them to do the job that they want to do. And they want to be the best they can be at. And boy, that was a long answer to, I don't even know what the question was.
So, but I love it. And you're just hitting on so many things. But something I want to talk about, because right now, and I just wrote a thing on my Facebook page, I don't know if you've seen it, about caregivers. And for me, and a lot of people I talk to, my abuser, I'm caregiving for. So for me, it's, okay, I'm taking that person out to lunch. I'm making sure that they have food, they have the pens, they have all this stuff. And then a lot of times that anger just comes back. But then the Lord put it on my heart. He said, Rich, hurt people. And in order for me to be forgiven by him, I have to forgive them. I don't forget, but I have to try to forgive. Mm-hmm. So with your father, and I'm going to ask you, because I've talked to a lot of people that were abused by their fathers. And for me, I never wanted to call God Father because I was abused. And the last person that abused me was my father. So I don't want to be calling him Father.
I get
it. But now that I've gotten closer with him, I call him Daddy. When I pray, I'm like, Dad, I need your help. So talk to us about, trying to care for or being in the company of somebody that abused you. And then how is it when, coming into relationship with God and calling him Father?
I agree with you completely. That was a difficult transition. I used many other names, Lord and God and Jesus and Savior, and a lot of them. And it took me a long time to get to Father, because that's a person that hurts you and is unhealthy and will harm you and manipulate you. Took a long time to get to separate those two things out. As far as caregiving, God has given you an extra dose of strength and grace that I will never know. My father died maybe 11 years ago. He and my mother were still married. I am thankful that I was not put in a position to be a caregiver, because I would have struggled with that. I can't say what I would have done, because I didn't get put in that position, but I honor you for doing what God's called you to do.
So once your mother knew, once your sister knew, and once your father knew that everybody knew, did you ever talk to him about it ever?
Mm-mm. Nope. No, it was never a conversation we had, other than he said to my mother, "It's true. Everything is true." My statute of limitations was up. There was nothing legally that I could do. I would have, because I don't believe I'm his only victim. And in fact, I know I'm not. I would have pressed charges. I would have prosecuted. I would have done whatever I could do. But, and well, as I say that, remember that my dad's a really great guy, and everybody loves my dad. And we as a society like to think that perpetrators drive a white van and they pull up beside you and say, "Hey, little girl, do you want some candy?" But the reality is that we know them. And a large majority of the time, it's somebody in our family, and we know them.
Okay, so last couple of questions before we log off. What are some of the things? Because, like I said, I'm a parent, and hopefully, I'm going to be a grandparent someday if the Lord lets
It's
me
the
live long
best.
enough.
It's the best gig in the world, let me tell you.
What are some signs and what are things to look out for? Because I just had the director and the producer of the movie The Sound of Freedom. He was on my show last month, and we were talking about trafficking. We were talking about abuse. So, but he helped with but he never went through the abuse. So, in your opinion, what are some of the things that parents and grandparents should be looking out for around their kids and their grandkids?
I would say to watch for, is there a change somehow in their behavior? Are they acting out in a manner that they've never acted out? I always encourage people to remember that anger is a secondary emotion. It's a secondary emotion to something else. So if you have a child that's all of a sudden angry, if you have a child that was getting good grades in school and now all of a sudden they're not, if you have a young child who's potty trained and now all of a sudden they're wetting the bed, or they're wetting their pants, huge red flag. If you have a child that was outgoing or that is outgoing and all of a sudden they've become very withdrawn and very quiet and pulled away from everything, any kind of a change in a behavior like that, perhaps their eating habits have changed. And I'm working with a young girl who's 19, and her abuser was her best friend's father, and as he was abusing her, told her that he really liked her curves. And so she became almost anorexic, trying to get rid of the curves that he said he liked. So a change in eating patterns, are they not eating? Are they binge eating? What's happening at school? I will tell you, school was my safe place, and I loved school. I didn't do well in school, but the last day of school every year, I cried all the way home, because I knew I was going to be, my father drilled oil in Alaska, and you can only drill in the wintertime. And I knew I was going to be home with him every day in the summertime. So never, ever underestimate the power that a school holds. It's a safe place. It's a hot meal. It's hopefully a caring teacher. Those are all things that I would look for.
Okay, so now this is a teaching podcast, obviously. I want everybody to get something out of this. So now, if there's somebody out there, because in my town, and again, I'm an OG, I'm an old guy. When we were growing up, they had something called the DARE program, and now it's called LEAD here in my town. And I'm in charge of that program. And on average, 5,000 adolescents attempt suicide every day in the United States.
It's at big proportions.
Yep, and most of them are not. A lot of them are not even reported, so the numbers are way out of whack.
Very
But
skewed.
also, I found out that if a little girl has been abused, a lot of the times, not all of the times, if they were abused at 6 years, 7 years old, it might not come out for 30 or 40 years. And the average age for somebody to actually come out and talk about it is actually 54 years old.
Yep, it sure is.
So now, if somebody's listening to this podcast right now, what would be your top 3 pieces of advice for them to get help and to finally find some peace in their life?
I think the number one thing I would want them to know is that I believe you. We don't make this crap up. I believe you. And if you're talking to someone who's not believing you because it happened so long ago, why are you just now talking about it? Then those people don't understand the depths of trauma and the depths of guilt, shame, and humiliation. So know that you're worth it. You're worth more, and you're not who someone said you were. You're not fat and ugly and stupid and ignorant and dumb, and you will amount to something. So give yourself the same grace that you would give someone else in the same situation. Encourage them to seek help. Encourage them, even if there's in my case, there was no prosecute. There was no option to prosecute or follow through with the judicial system. You're worth getting rid of all of this, all of the layers, and start shedding that and be the person that God's called you to be. And I would say absolutely call out to God, because he's our ultimate healer and physician. But you're worth it. And hope is contagious. And if we each light one person's lantern, then pretty soon we've lit up a whole land. But you're worth it. Your kids are worth it. Your grandkids are worth it. Get healthy for you. Get healthy for your grandkids. Get healthy for your kids. Learn to love the sound of your own laughter. It's never too late.
How do we find you? How do we get in touch with you? How can we get in your ecosystem and become part of your mission?
There's a lot of space. Come on in. My website, I have a website that has all of my information on it. The name of my nonprofit is Courage Starts With You, because it starts with each and every one of us. So you can find my website that way. Courage Starts With You, or you can simply type in my name, Sherrie Allsup. Both of those will take you to my website. My website has my phone number, my information, my calendar of where I'm going to be and where I've been. My email is simply Sherrie Allsup. So if you can remember my name, you got my email. My phone number is plastered on my website. You can call me, you can text me. I give out my phone number everywhere I go. And at colleges, I get lots. Once I leave a college, I get lots and lots of texts from college students wanting to tell me their story. Sexual assault on a college campus is running rampant at epidemic rates, but we can't talk about it because, it makes people uncomfortable. So call me, text me, email me, visit my website. If you can't remember any of those, my girl Jessica's got all my information. You can always reach Jessica. She'll give you my information. If you're law enforcement, I've got lots of great referrals from law enforcement. If law enforcement wants to get a hold of me, I'd love to come and train your officers. We'll come on site and do it so that you don't have to travel all of your officers away. I've post credit in, a lot of states. So your officers get post credit for that. And I'd love to be able to help your officers have some more tools to put in their tool belt.
I love it. So I want to thank, first of all, I want to thank God, first of all, for putting us together.
Yes.
Jessica Dalby, love you, love you, love you. Thank you so much. Cousin Andrea, I want to say thank you. I love you, cuz, and I got your 6. Also, I want to thank Monster Energy for giving me the energy to keep doing what I do. But as I end my episodes, I'm a big Joel Osteen guy. I love Joel. I don't care what anybody says about him. But for me, I usually wear my other T-shirt that says "Today I Decide," because we have a choice, and people that listen to my show know they have a choice. They can either wake up this morning and be a victim, or they can be a victor. We have the choice. It's up to us to decide: do I want to play the victim game anymore, or do I want to be a victor? And everybody listens to this show. You guys are victors. And I just wanted to say, I love you guys and I appreciate you guys. So Sherrie, I just want to say thank you for taking this time. And I'm so blessed and grateful that we finally got to hang out.
Thank you. It was fabulous. Thanks for what you do.
And I love it. So make sure you check out her website. And the name of this episode is called Courage Starts With You. So make sure you go to her website, check her out, and it's going to be great, the things that you're doing. And I would love to get together because every year I throw a virtual mental health summit, and I would love to have you as part of our mental health summit.
I would love that. Thank you.
So I love you guys. Remember, vertical momentum, the only way to go is but up. And I'll probably see you in about 2 hours. So I love you guys.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Thank you so much. And when you see Gary, tell him thank you for being the hero that he is.
He is. I will. Thank you.
Have a great day.
Bye.